there are probably a lot of authors who very much feel like they're unknown, feel like they have a small audience or maybe even hardly any audience at all. And it makes the dream of being a full-time writer or the possibility of being spending more time writing and that sort of thing feel out of reach. But I'll talk about how long I've been a full-time writer in this article, I believe, and it will expand on that. But as an author with a relatively small audience, generally speaking, I have tried a bunch of different things and have slowly built up enough of an audience to where I can support myself with my writing. But there are a lot of intermediate phases there. And at this point, I generally make more than I did when I was a teacher, take home. So that's pretty good. This year, I'm probably going to drop pretty far below that. So there's a lot of things that have happened with some cognitive issues. I'm not being as consistent with certain things as I used to be. So even though the audience and the potential are still there, I'm not drawing as much income from them as I have in the past because I've slowed down on a couple things and other issues as well. And also there's other factors too. A lot of my income went up during the pandemic a good bit. Some people were buying books apparently. But a lot of that dropped off as we went along too. So I'll talk about some of that as we go here. All right, so again, this is called Surviving a Decade as a Full-Time Author That No One Has Heard of. All right, to be accurate, I've been a full-time author for a little over 8.5 years, and a few people know who I am. If I don't make it another year and a half, or if I become world famous, I'll issue a retraction. I left my teaching job in February of 2013 with no better plan than to write zombie stories for a living. The plan changed and expanded a little over the years, and I've managed to support my family with writing income ever since. Here's how I did it. Okay, next section, believing your own myth. This is something I've espoused a lot in various places all through my writing career, and I'll explain it again here a little bit. The primary motivation for leaving my teaching job was that one of my sons was sick. He was having seizures, and our options were to put him on medication or prevent him from having fevers. Being in daycare was causing him to catch everything. In an effort to avoid seizure meds during his developmental years, I decided to quit my job, pull out my retirement savings, and stay home with him. This worked out well for my son. I'm on seizure medication now, and based on the fogginess I experience, I'm glad he was spared that. Again, I don't have any problem with medication, so I don't want this to come off that like I don't believe in modern medicine. It was just he was so very very young, and was just learning how to speak, just learning how to walk, and I believe in seizure medications because I take them. I have some seizures issues related to some of the same cognitive issues I'm having from some brain damage I've gotten, but so I believe in them and I use them because I need them, but. With my son being that young and him having febrile seizures, I really wanted to avoid him getting the drawdown from those medications because they can have a developmental impact. If he continued to have seizures now and we thought it was necessary, we might put him on it. But we kind of came up with a plan to see if we could avoid that if we could, and it worked out okay for him. There were secondary motivations too. Teaching in public school system was soul crushing. I had a promising former student commit suicide, and my tolerance for the unimportant bureaucratic nonsense dropped to zero. I was also facing my own declining health from polycystic kidney disease, a genetic disorder that killed my grandmother, my father, and my younger brother. Fortunately, I got a kidney transplant and doing fine there. Thank goodness for medications, yes. If you need them, you should take them. And of course, doctors are responsible for helping us figure out the right balances, which isn't always easy, but sometimes necessary. I remember the day I stepped out of school for the last time after being released from my contract in the middle of the year. I had no safety net other than the savings and the long shot of making a living as a writer. Still, the air was fresher, colors were brighter. I remember what song was playing on the radio as I drove away. I've had several people ask me what song that was, and it seems kind of silly, but I don't ever tell anybody. Not because I'm embarrassed by it, but just because that's kind of a piece of the story I keep for myself. Eventually, I would publish a short story in Best Horror of the Year, Volume 5, which happened to be a zombie story, by the way. I would be nominated for a Splatterpunk Award. That was for a short story called Seersucker Motherfucker. I would amass a number of other writing credits along the way, All that was in the future, though. I really had nothing I could point to that would justify quitting my job to write full time. Yeah. Oops, I did it again. That was the song that was playing. Good job, Armand. That's funny. Took me a second to remember what you were talking about. But sometimes you have to take a chance on yourself. You have to gamble on your own potential against the risk that you might fail miserably. You have to believe your own myth. The truth was, I wasn't ready to be a full-time author. My skill level was far, far below where it is now. It might have better served me to be practical and realistic about where I was. But to achieve my goals, I had to believe I was capable of more. I had to believe I could surpass expectations. I failed at times, but sometimes I succeeded because I fooled myself into thinking I could. The myth that worked for me was that I'm a really good writer who is capable of moments of greatness. Looking back at my work from that time, I wonder why editors even bothered talking to me. On the other hand, I did start producing work that some people thought was good, and they gave me money in exchange for it. But I had to believe the myth before other people would. So I guess that's maybe a trick of confidence, really, the idea of believing your own myth. You kind of have to begin from a place where you realize you're not quite there yet, but then you build up this myth for yourself of what you're capable of being, and you kind of pursue that. And it's sort of a way of tricking yourself. But looking back, I can realize now that I was nowhere near the level of skill or the ability to do this full time, but I did it anyway because I tricked myself into thinking I could. Learn all you can from every source. This is not to say that every source is equal or that you should take advice from all or even most people. Sometimes all you can learn from certain people is what not to do, how not to treat people, or how to destroy your career. Other authors, editors, creatives, publishers, business people, teachers, and mentors carry a wealth of knowledge. You have to decide what applies to you. Decide what needs to be filed away for later use. Then reevaluate those pearls of wisdom as you grow as a person and as an author. Writing conventions offer classes. Universities offer programs. Masterclass has brilliant courses from famous authors. Authors write books on writing. Successful authors have YouTube channels, blogs, and Patreon pages. Some of those authors drop wisdom on their social media. When in the presence of authors talking about the craft, the business side of things, or the industry, I find it valuable to listen. The gatekeepers who have accepted and rejected my work have improved my writing. Notes dropped and rejection emails have opened my eyes to fundamental truths about not just specific submissions, but all stories. Editors have passed on invaluable insights and course corrections, both large and small. Over time, I've gotten better at deciding what edits I act upon and which ones I ignore. All I had to do was enter the editing process with an open mind, an open heart, and a humble attitude. 1% improvement. And this one's important too because this is one I use with Twitch a good bit. So kind of out of my comfort zone in terms of writing on stream and that sort of thing at first. But I always kind of looked for like 1% improvement. What's one element I can add to the stream that makes it a little bit better? What's one thing I can add on my page that makes it a little better? All that kind of stuff. As I progressed, live streaming became a big part of my writing work and income. It was a new arena for me, so I had a lot to learn. I listened and gathered insight from successful streamers who were not writers. I gleaned what I could and figured out how it applied to what I was doing. One key point made by many streaming experts applied doubly or triply to writing. Content is vital. All other decisions you make are built upon creating content the audience wants to engage with. If you are not offering your best work, they'll seek it somewhere else. Another principle I've applied is the idea of 1% improvement. We can be overwhelmed if we start comparing ourselves to other more successful people in our field. As you take in everything someone else has to tell you in a book, a video, or a class, you can feel like you're trying to drink from a fire hose. It's too much, too fast, all at once. It helps me to break things down into actionable pieces. Instead of trying to fix everything at once, I pick one specific detail. I improve that small bit first. In working on that one thing at a time, I'm surrounding aspects of your work will improve as a side effect. With that 1% improvement and its residual effects, you'll find yourself in a better position to work on the next thing. Another 1% improvement effort begins, and you find yourself with much larger cumulative advancement in your quality of work. When I first read On Writing by Stephen King, I was overwhelmed. My head was still spinning from quitting my day job, and I felt like I couldn't process everything in the book. I reread it more recently, and it seemed like a simple, practical book of writing advice. I could even see aspects that no longer applied to me. I was a different person and writer. There were a lot of small improvements between these readings. Diversification and creative financing. Like a financial portfolio, I embrace the idea of diversification. I self-published work, published work through gatekeepers, built a platform on Patreon, did some ghostwriting, did freelance writing for various groups, and became a staff writer for a bunch of publications. More recently, I started publishing work on the Godless platform, started live streaming my writing on Twitch, and took a shot at producing serials on Kindle Vella. I've since let Kindle Vella go. I'm not the amount of time going into that. I'm just going to use other places. So my stories on there are going to be rolling off soon, so I haven't been advertising them. Not all of my efforts produce results. Some things were tried and left behind. Some things worked for a while and then fizzled out. There were platforms that were a slow build that I'm still working on now. Sometimes it paid off to get involved in a thing before everyone else did. Other times my efforts were lost in the rush of other writers trying to cash in. The net result of this push toward diversification of income was something closer to stability than you normally get from a writing career. The demand was I had to produce a lot of quality work quickly. My own writing produced income slower and more sporadically. Ghostwriting and freelance income came quicker. For a time, ghostwriting was the majority of my income. About 5 years ago, it flipped to where more of my writing income came from things written in my own name. As I tried to rally from one loss or worked to develop a slow-building platform, that the diversified sources underscored my efforts. I had to be creative with my finances as I was with my writing. One lesson I learned is that I can get by on less money. My family and I would be fine. The list of true needs is much smaller than the total list of our wants. When money is tight, you can cut away a lot of extra spending and be surprised how much less you can get by on. Right now, my family is living more comfortably than we have in the past, but that can change quickly. We'll be okay if it does. A few years ago at a convention, a well-known author on a panel answered a question about when you should go full-time as a writer. His answer included a certain number of bestsellers, a certain amount of money in the bank, and so forth. It was an exhaustive list, and I didn't have most of those things in place then or now. I have another author friend who has done very well with his writing recently. He and his wife sat down to figure out how much they needed for him to retire early, and the number appeared astronomical to me. With his writing income and what he was making at his day job, they figured they could get that number in 2 or 3 more years, and he could then retire a few years early to write full time. I can't argue too much with the logic of that previous paragraph. I did argue with it vehemently in my younger days, but that was me imposing myself on the choices of others. I didn't want to wait that long. Others prefer to have more security and a sound financial plan. Those ideas may not be completely congruent with the notion of full-time writing, though. One time I overheard 2 successful mid-list authors discussing what it was like to be on the bestseller list. They said every time they made the list, it was like starting over. Getting back there again was just as much of a grind as it was the first time. It never got easier for them. I took comfort in that because I was used to grinding out a living as a writer. It might be one of my greatest skills when it comes down to it. I did all these things while being relatively unknown. Many authors within my circle of peers are better known and wider read than I am. I don't need to surpass them or even compete with them. Out of the vast populations of readers out there, I only need the smallest fraction to buy into what I'm doing. There are a lot of doomsday predictions about the number of readers in the world dwindling. The reality is there are still millions upon millions of readers out there buying books and engaging other non-traditional platforms. I only need to convince a few of those to check me out to keep this life going. And I still stand by that. So again, each time I'm gaining a follower, a reader, or whatever it is, that adds to my audience, which adds, of course, to income. I don't need 10,000 more of those. That would be nice, if you're trying to get rich and famous. But only a few more. That's all I really need to pay my bills each month, to cover for a reader that drops off or has bought everything that I've written and is not buying anything else, all that kind of stuff. So again, sometimes we think in terms of I can't do this unless I get tons and tons of supporters, but really you just need to take on a few more and a few more and a few more until you got your income covered, and over time that builds up. At least that's how it worked for me. When everyone thinks it's a bad idea, and I think this is important too, because there's always going to be people in your lives that tell you taking a big risk on something you're doing is a mistake. Sometimes it's a mistake because all big risks come with big downsides. There's a chance you can fail, but even when you fail, you can start over. So the risk of failing sometimes isn't as bad as the consequences of never taking a risk. All right, when I told everyone I was going full-time as an author, they looked at me like I was crazy. Most of them waited until I wasn't around to express their concerns to each other. It wasn't like they were talking behind my back. It was more like they saw me running naked down the street, or I had revealed myself to be some other life form. They didn't want to upset me in my fragile mental state. A lot of the talk was along the lines of whether they should do something or what might happen to me if this was allowed to go on. After I made it work for a while, writer acquaintances of mine started striking up conversations. They wanted details. How did I do it? How I did it? How much I was making? These conversations usually stopped right about the time they found out a thing they didn't like. Not enough money, not the kind of work they wanted to do, etc. I realized they were looking for the thing they could use to dismiss my choice as not right for them. Over the years, the conversation shifted to people legitimately trying to figure out how I was doing it and how they could make it work for them. Some were arguably more successful and more well-known than me, but they were still working a day job. I was an oddity to them, and they wanted to know more. Family members might not be thrilled if you take this giant leap of faith. There could be a lot of trying to talk you out of it. If you have a spouse or a significant other, you should really run the choice by them first. Even if they are supportive, they might be scared. I've heard a lot of stories of authors who ended up divorced, not just from going full-time, but from failing to find a balance in their lives that included loved ones. No one wants to be placed in a secondary position in the lives of those they love. I know I have neglected my family and my wife in an effort to produce ridiculous word counts in order to pay our bills. I'm lucky my wife has been wildly supportive and worked with me to find the right balance, refusing to give up when all evidence says you should. I firmly believe the biggest difference between those who make it and those who fail comes down to the refusal to quit. Sometimes we beat failure simply by outlasting it and plowing through. There have been multiple moments when the right choice for me would have been to quit and go back to the day job, but then something would work out. We'd get through it and move on to the next phase. This repeated over and over again throughout the years I've been writing full time. Every time is like starting over and grinding out a life again. So again, I would hit these really lean times in my writing career when bills were coming due and we didn't have enough money and things like that. And it would be just so clear to me that probably the right choice was to go back to teaching or go back to any day job. And I would struggle with that, and I would keep going and I'd keep going and I wouldn't give up. And eventually something would work out. Some ghostwriting job would finally pay through. There'd be some big month of purchases on a book that I'm selling. A book that had kind of died out would pick up really well. An ad would start working and I'd start making sales. Whatever it was, there'd be just enough coming in to where we would survive it and kind of get past it and start cruising along again. And all of those things kind of came from a refusal to give up, which is, again, is a very risky move if you're running into some financial trouble. All right. Life never stops throwing stuff at you. Full-time writing has never been a life experienced in isolation. My family went through it with me. Normal and extraordinary life stuff kept happening. The events of the world still happened and impacted me. I went through full kidney failure due to my polycystic kidney disease. I got a live donor kidney transplant that changed my life completely. Since then, I've struggled with seizures that required medication, which changed the rules of my life. I have experienced some cognitive impairment that is still being tested. It might be degenerative dementia, which wouldn't be the best news. That would change the rules of my life yet again and required some adjustments to expectations I place on myself. It would shift the priorities of my life and my writing. By the way, I'm still waiting on some of that testing. Medicine moves slow if you're not actively dying, I guess. Writing with cognitive impairment may require its own article, which I still have the capacity, while I still have the capacity to write it. And actually, LitReactor has asked me to write that article, so I'm working on that this month to maybe come out next month or the month after. We all have our own challenges to navigate in life, and none of us is given a pass, no matter how grand our plans for life might be. So sometimes it may seem like life is not cooperating with your dreams, but even when things are going well and things are moving along towards what you're going after, life is still not necessarily cooperating with your dreams. You're still going to get stuff thrown at you. When I was going through kidney failure, I could have given up and people would have understood. Now that I'm going through cognitive impairments, I could stop streaming because it is a difficult mental task that I have to kind of build myself up for. And there are some days where I'm taking the risk that I might stutter or lose my train of thought, or and all that happening live before people. But I also find that because I've practiced writing so much, that when I get into the mode of writing, my brain starts to work a little better. And even when I'm having a cloudy day, I can think more clearly when I'm writing. Now again, that doesn't always work out great because there are days where I do struggle and I have canceled streams because of it. But my new goal is to go ahead and attempt the streams anyway, even when I'm having a bad day. Go in and just do the best I can, because even if I write a story that's difficult for me and doesn't pay off or doesn't pan out, I'm going to write another story tomorrow and everything will be fine. So one of my goals with dealing with cognitive impairment is to keep going at it, to not quit things that are working for me, but to power through, even if I can't be perfect at it. And so that's kind of what's going on today. I'm pretty clear mentally today, so that's good. It's been a while, but I got my third COVID vaccine on Monday, because again, I'm a kidney transplant patient. So people who are immunocompromised, they're finding need yet another shot to kind of get our immunity up to where some of you healthy people have it with the shots you've gotten. So I'm feeling a little rough. A little worn down, a little fatigued, a little bit of muscle ache, that kind of thing. But I'm okay. And all these kind of challenges that come along, I make the choice to keep going, to keep working through it. And I find it very rewarding. Sometimes some of these struggles I encounter really kind of set the priorities for me. I can really look and say, okay, I'm trying to do 10 things and I'm not in a mental state where I can do that anymore. So what are the important things? What are the things I either have to do, even if I don't want to, if it's like an obligation or a deadline or anything like that? And then what are the things that really make me want to write? What are the things that I'll be proud that I have finished, that I'm most excited about? And then sometimes I find that some things are getting in the way. I liked the Kindle Vella stories that I was writing, and I was willing to work that platform, even though I wasn't getting a lot of traction with it to start with. I was willing to keep going with it because I enjoyed the stories I was writing and so forth. But when I had to let some things go, I had to look at the amount of time that was taking up. And even though it was something I enjoyed doing, there was other things I wanted to do more. And so I kind of set those things aside. I'm not losing the stories. I still have what I've wrote. I'm just having to go off the Kindle Vella platform because I'm not going to be able to post as often as I wanted to. So that's not a loss for me. That's just a change of priorities, a change of strategy. And there may be another platform that comes up and I try it out. I'm on TikTok, but unlike a lot of authors on TikTok, I'm just kind of there to see what other people are doing. But I figured out the OBS software that we use for streaming works great with TikTok too. So you can change the dimensions, you can put it together so I can like create the video and edit it outside of that platform. So I made a few of them just to practice, and that editing practice helps me get better at editing these videos. So all that to say that like when you face certain struggles and when you're trying new things, you can kind of build on what you've already done. And even if you're disabled, even if you're dealing with some challenges, there are things that you won't be able to do as well as you did in the past. But there are other ways that you can work around, and that's kind of where I am as sort of a person with cognitive disabilities. I'm using my good days to the fullest, and I'm doing the best I can on the cloudy days. And I think that's pretty much all I can do. And it's a good life. I enjoy being a writer, and even if it does turn out that I have degenerative dementia, which is something the doctors are concerned about, there will be a day that will be tougher than today down the line, but that's not today. And today is the only day I have to work with. And so on days when I'm not feeling my best, on days when I'm kind of scared that it may be dementia, because I do have symptoms that point in that direction, I sure do hope they get the testing going here pretty quickly. I'm going to enjoy the life I have in the meantime. I'm going to make the most of who I am right now with all the abilities I have now. And every bit of writing, every article, every short story, every novel that I create now, between now and whatever diminished state I might be in the future, all of that will be a legacy left behind. That'll be stuff that can't be taken away from me. One reason I enjoy these Twitch sessions is because I can make I can edit videos for YouTube. I can take the stories that I create here, and every story is one new thing that's sort of my mark on the world. And of course, I want to keep making money to do this full time, but in some ways, the money has almost become secondary to me, to just the act of creating, which is probably how it should always be. But when you're a full-time writer, you do have to focus a good bit on the finances. All right. So figuring out what's next, and I think some of what I said is already in this next section, so I apologize if I repeat myself here in the last section. Figuring out what's next as a full-time author. You may have deep fears of missing opportunities or making the wrong decisions. It can paralyze your forward momentum, no matter what you do in life. With full-time writing, it can feel like you're always on the edge of failure and poverty. The reality is that no one thing holds sway over your progress. Most doors you go through won't be magical portals to ultimate unwavering success either. No matter how many opportunities present themselves, you can't say yes to everything. Well, I guess you can, but you can't say yes to everything and successfully deliver. Something will always suffer. Something will be neglected. The more things you say yes to, the more you will neglect things that are central to what you want to be doing. As life changes around me, I find myself having to say no to more things. Things I don't want to do, things that aren't right for me, things that steal time from the people I love, the things I don't want to spend my last lucid years doing will all get cut first. Then there are the things I want to do but simply don't have the time or energy to commit to. Those probably hurt the most, but I do my best to forgive myself for things outside my control. It doesn't hurt to take a chance, though. Like the leap of faith to go full-time as an author, there are times when taking a gamble on yourself might change everything. When a new possibility opens up, don't be afraid to explore it. Streaming my writing live on Twitch was probably the biggest outside-the-box move I'd made in recent years, and it's starting to pay off. My cognitive impairments make it challenging sometimes, but it's one of the things I'm proudest of in my efforts to make a living through writing. One of life's greatest opportunities is developing relationships of mutual support. This is not to say that these relationships will lead to your next big break. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. In the end, no financial benefit amounts to as much as having people in your corner, not being alone when you face those big moments in life. I'm not saying you should quit your day job and become a full-time writer tomorrow, but I'm not saying you can't do just that.